Did you ever think that you have to be a programmer to do any of the technical stuff I talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about it today, and I'm going to talk about why you don't need a programmer, but why you should listen to one. And before I get started, if you are just scrolling, clicking, or somehow found your way to listening to my voice, I just want to introduce myself. If you don't know me, my name is Kimberly Inez Mays. I demystify technology for small and medium businesses so that they can generate and nurture leads with marketing automation and AI. And what I typically talk about and what I still talk about is about why you as a business owner should be using email marketing, funnels, landing pages, and all of the cool and exciting programs and software that is available to you. And how to do that in a very smart way without losing a lot of time, money, and sanity. Because I see that a lot of businesses lose all three when they try to implement and set things up, especially if it's an area with which they're unfamiliar. And I know this all too well because even though I do this for a living and I've done this for many, many years, I am not unlike a lot of people, believe it or not. And I go through trial and error, and I go through things that work and things that don't work. And, I still am learning. And I think that people never really stop learning. And that's the whole point of this video, is to share what I've learned and also to share the fact that I am still learning. And why I titled it, No, You Don't have to be a programmer, but you should listen to one, is because as I think back on the things that I've done in my life, it has been literally trial and error, and programming is trial and error. Even if you use AI to code, I know there's going to be one or two people that DM me later and say, hey, now with ChatGPT, Claude, and all the other ones, you've got to be a programmer. You kind of do, but I'll save that for another video. But why I think learning to code, learning to program is a lot like the parallels in life is that sometimes you get errors. You get errors that you have to go digging for, errors that you have to figure out what went wrong, where it went wrong, and how to fix it. And I thought back on how I learned to code, which is no one taught me. I kind of figured it out along the way. And yeah, I took classes. Of course, I took classes in high school and college, but classes really haven't taught me a lot about coding unless you are doing it for a project. But even then, it hits different when you're doing it for your own work or doing it in the real world in corporate America. And so having done all three, I can say that the latter two are a lot more experience giving. And without further ado, I'll just tell you why I say it's like trial and error. So if you've never scripted or programmed anything before, I'm going to try to give you a visual picture in your mind of what it looks like, right? You have a task. Maybe you're building a website. Maybe you're building a form. Maybe you're building something that takes in information from the user and then gives it back out. And throughout this entire process, and if you're just listening to my voice, I'm using my hands. So think of it like a giant box, and then you have like stuff going into the box and stuff coming out the box, right? And your job, or my job really, was to program what happens inside that box. So whether that is someone putting in information in a form and having that form do something with that information and then putting that information somewhere, or whether I was building, I've built stuff in Oracle, I've built stuff in PL SQL, I've built stuff in, I'm just thinking of all the things that I've built. So I built web applications, database applications, and then I've built a lot of stuff. But even when you're building it, even when you're programming it, you're putting in the code to say, okay, here's what the data looks like, here's what I'm going to do with it, and then here is the result of it. And sometimes it is not always a linear, pretty process. So sometimes you have an idea of what you need the final output to look like, but you have to say, okay, well, how am I going to take the steps to get there? I remember in one of my jobs, no one taught me what to do, and I got no help whatsoever. I'm not going to say the company, but I got absolutely no help, and I had to figure it out all by myself. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know this programming language. I think I know a little bit. I could try to figure out some ways about it. And the thing is, figuring out what to do while being paid to do it is very it's very nerve wracking, because you're like, well, I don't want to make a big mistake that blows something up, but I got to learn how to do this and no one's helping me. So what to do, right? I started very simple. I said, okay, well, if I know that I want this input to turn into this output, I need something in between. And the first thing I need to code is to make sure that the input is working, meaning that if I put stuff into this process, can I test that that input actually worked? So whether I'm creating something to upload a file, or whether I'm creating a form, or whether I'm creating something that and I'm trying to speak as simply as possible, because I don't want to go into the nomenclature and the jargon of, like, object oriented programming and classes and all of that. I'm trying to keep this very, very simple. So one of the things that I had to determine is, like, okay, do I have the right inputs? Am I getting the right data into the box that I'm creating, which is my application? Am I getting the right data in first? And I'm testing that before trying to do anything with that data, before trying to create this big machine. Am I getting the stuff in first? And how I would test that is after creating a process to input the data, whether that's a form, whether that's data from a file, or whatever the case may be. In this case, it was a database application. Whether not, like, that programming language was for the web or for something else, doesn't really matter. But I had to make sure my inputs are good, because without good inputs, then the rest of your code is going to be trash. And so then how I would test that input is to have it printed back out to me, like, yes, I've interpreted that, this form is good, this importer is good, the file exists, whatever have you. And then once that's satisfactory, I would say, okay, well, now let's put that data somewhere. It may not be like the full totality of what I want, but let's put that information somewhere. So if I'm doing a form, for example, I would do maybe a simple output to say, all right, well, let's test out first and last name. Let's test out email. Let's make sure that this is going to where it needs to go, even though it's not the full application yet. And there would be errors along the way. Some programming languages and some code require a comma at the end, right? Sometimes I would forget the comma, or certain things would need to be cased a certain way, or maybe I'm missing a bracket of code or somewhere, and it would throw an error. And then I would have to take apart my code piece by piece to find out where the error was. And I would have to isolate the error and make adjustments for the error and make provisions for the error. So think about me doing this, starting from pretty much nothing, making sure my inputs are good, making sure that the output is good, and then finding little pieces along the way to either further develop or to troubleshoot. So that's not that much unlike life, where you have a big idea and you're like, okay, well, how do I make this something? Some people get bogged down in the execution of it, and they never really get anywhere, because every little detail needs to be perfect. And I thought that if I taught myself to code that way, I probably would not have gotten anywhere, because literally what I had to do was to create the shell of the thing that I wanted, except that it was going to be not the full program, but partially what I wanted, and then keep building on that and isolating and tweaking. So it was a very iterative process. I never started anything, from the beginning and then worked my way down all in one swoop. I actually built the framework of the solution that I wanted to build, and then I would go in and I would build out each individual components, testing inputs and outputs along the way. And I think that's the best I can do to explain it from a non-technical sort of way. I'm trying very hard not to use certain terms, because then I would lose like half of y'all. So if you just think of anything that you want to do, break it down. That's usually the advice given. It's like you break stuff down. You say, okay, well, how can I make this task simpler so that it's easier to execute? And the way my mind works is, since I'm a big picture thinker, it's like, okay, well, what will get you to point A to Z the fastest? And then you worry about the rest of the letters later, or you fill in the rest of the alphabet later. For example, I'm just thinking, and if anybody's listening and I had a conversation with you, please note that I'm not isolating you, or I'm not singling anyone out. I'm just drawing from past conversations, past clients, and things that I've seen. So I know a lot of people, they want to build courses, and I know that a lot of people that I speak to are somewhere between A and Z on their course. And I've been guilty of this. So some people are between A and Z on their course or on their program or whatever the case may be, because they are bogged down somewhere like 30% of the way. They're probably thinking like, okay, well, I have to have everything together. I have to have all of the pieces in place before I get to Z. Now, what tends to happen is, not that they are procrastinating or anything, they're definitely motivated people, but there's always that in the back of their mind of like, okay, well, I can only go one step at a time. I'm not allowed to skip steps. And I'm telling you from an experience as a programmer, you are allowed to skip steps. You are allowed to think about things in a way of like, what's the fastest way to get this done, and then fill it in later. And it's not even about being a perfectionist, about not being a perfectionist. It's about saying, okay, if you want to even make your product even better, you're going to have to find out what's working and what's not working very quickly. So if I went really slowly through my code and went really slowly through the application, I would have never been able to quickly identify errors in my code and fix it without having to do things fast, delete a bunch of code, comment out a bunch of code, and then say, okay, well, line 133 is not working. Let me isolate that and let me print out what this thing is supposed to be doing so I can find the problem quickly. And I'll also bring it back to doing a course, right? Some people spend so much time building out courses, but they don't even know that maybe module number 3 is not the best module for their students, because they're so hung up on getting module 2 perfected or module 4 that they just never put it out there to get that data in real time. They never got that error message, from somebody saying, hey, can you explain module 3 a little bit better? Or maybe they just discovered that, hey, not every module needs a workbook, or not every module needs an activity. So I say all that to say is, when you implement something, think about it as a giant box. You got inputs and you got outputs, and your task is to build that thing as quickly as possible so that you can fill it in with all of the gears and the things that enable it to work exactly the way you want. Because it's never going to be completely done. You're always going to be refining things, tweaking things, optimizing things. And I think that is what really led me down the path of teaching myself literally anything, PHP. I didn't start with PHP. I started with HTML, which technically is not a programming language. It's a markup language. But I taught myself that, and I had errors along the way. Think of me like 15 years old in the late 90s, tinkering with code and tinkering with this and that. Maybe things didn't come out quite right, so I would go back and redo it. And then when I learned C++, I was 17 in high school. And think of me sitting there. Sometimes code would break, sometimes it wouldn't. And back then I would have to run it through a compiler, and it would compile it and tell me, okay, you've made a mistake on line 12 or whatever, then I would have to redo the whole thing again. So I've learned the process of redoing things, optimizing things, and making it better. And so while you don't need to be a programmer to learn email marketing, you don't need to be a programmer to learn funnels or to even build your own website now. You just literally drag and drop. I think the mindset still helps to say, okay, well, this is never going to be perfect. What can I put out right now? What is the big picture? What can I put out right now to keep things moving forward? And how do I make those slight adjustments in between? And this is why I teach something called the box method. And I haven't put like a trademark on it or anything. And I'm pretty sure if you Google box method, you're going to get a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But I call it the box method because this is how I keep my head on straight. This is how I keep my head on straight because I think of everything like a box. You have your highest ticketed item in one box, and then the other boxes lead up to that. And within each box, you have processes, you have things that bring people from one side of the box to the other, whether that is a webinar or a summit or a free Facebook group or a training or whatever have you. It could even be a series of pages, funnels, email sequences. But if you think of that collection as a box with people going into the box and then out of the box and then into another box, it keeps you focused, it keeps you grounded, and it keeps me grounded. And I've taught a lot of people how to do this, and then they were astonished when they saw that their entire business plan was just like laid out very, very simply and very very plainly, without all of the distractions and bells and whistles that they think they need to have. And yeah, I draw on a lot of my own personal experiences, hours behind the screens. I would say even years behind the screens, just learning and being curious and just seeing what comes out of different things. But when you're trying to get something done, sometimes that curiosity, sometimes that urge to want to do more can get in the way. And sometimes you just have to go and execute. And so that will just leave you with that. And that is a little bit different than what I'm used to talking about. But I want you to understand that things don't need to be as complicated as you think they are. For example, if you want to grow an email list, if you want to create a form to collect payments for money, or not for money, but collect payments from, well, yeah, you would have to payment. Never mind. Scratch that last sentence from your memory. Whether you want to create a form to collect information or a checkout form to collect a payment for a service, an event, whatever the case may be, there are a lot of simple, lightweight solutions at your disposal. You just need to know what you need to look for. And this is why I created the Automated Thought Leader, because this is specifically designed for people who want to get off the hamster wheel of indecision and want to just now execute at their level. So I meet people where they're at. So I don't tell you that you need to now create 5 different funnels if you have one product, right? I'll just say, all right, what is the best way to get people from point A to point Z? And then we'll worry about the other letters, but where are you now and how can I get you there the fastest without losing your time, money, and sanity? Because there are many ways to lose those 3 things, especially with the explosion of new AI tools now. Sometimes it is a great thing, and then sometimes it is a not so great thing. So we want to make sure that we cut through the noise with your strategy and your strategy alone. And that is what the Automated Thought Leader is all about. So I'll leave you with that. I'll leave you with that thought. And a few more things. I am taking automation insight sessions. So these are free 30-minute sessions in which we talk about what's working, what's not working, and how I can best support you, what you've tried before, and how I can best support you. And now I said that twice. I usually say that at the end, but the number one takeaway is I want to support you. So that's all I got to say about that. All right, that's a little bit about my background as a programmer and why you don't need to be one, because I've got you, and yeah, that's all I got to say about that. So until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.